I am in South Florida at one of the most historic sites in this area and one of the most little known as well. I'm in Fort Myers, and most people, when they think about Fort Myers, they think of Fort Myers Beach, the pier, the shops, all the things that you typically do on a beach vacation. But in downtown Fort Myers is located the homes of Edison and Ford, Thomas Edison and Henry Ford winter estates. For 61 winters, Thomas Edison spent time here, getting away from the cold of New Jersey. And so when you're in Fort Myers, you can come down here and visit this fascinating place. So let me show you around. First of all, I'm going to give you just a real fast tour of the place, and then I'll slow it down a little bit and describe some of the details of this amazing place. When you go through the main entrance, you simply walk down the narrow path to the fountain. And at the fountain is kind of the midpoint to the estate. To the left is the Edison and Ford homes. And then to the right is his swimming pool, a caretaker's house, and his study. Straight ahead is a dock that Edison built. It's no longer functional, but this is the location where Edison would get all the supplies he needed for his home. Back in those days, there was not a nearby train station, and there also was no major roads, and so everything had to come down the Caloosahatchee River to be delivered. The first thing that I noticed coming up to Edison's winter home was how big the front porch is. So you can imagine Edison and his family enjoying the views of the river and also kind of escaping some of the warmth of the house itself. And you can take a look inside at the living room. Here is Edison's library. It had been a dining room and he converted it to a library. There is a phonograph. What I read, that was his favorite invention, a phonograph. The porch is a wraparound porch. I'd say it's about 12 to 14 feet wide. Here is Thomas Edison's bedroom. He and his wife, Menna. And for this time period, this is a very large bedroom. The furniture, most of it is original furniture. So Thomas Edison himself and his wife, family, all enjoyed this wicker furniture, as well as what's inside. Also notice the light. Of course, Edison, very famous for inventing a functioning light bulb, and then his work in electricity. Notice what's hanging from the light. That's the switch. They did not have wall switches back in those days, and so the switch is hanging from the light. So that's an original light here in the Edison house. Next door is the guest house. Thomas Edison, of course, was very famous, and he had a lot of famous visitors, including, for example, Herbert Hoover, the President of the United States, visited him here in 1928. As you walk up onto the porch, you see two fish. They're tarpons, and there's a big story behind that. To make a long story short, Thomas Edison and his son and some others went out fishing one day, and his son and Thomas Edison were separated. And while they're separated, his son caught a very large tarpon, which is pictured above the smaller one here. While away, Edison hooked another tarpon, and this was the first time Edison ever caught a tarpon, and he was really proud of it. And so when he got back to shore and he met up with his son, he started bragging on the tarpon he caught. But then his son took out the larger tarpon, and it became kind of a family joke that Thomas Edison was so proud to have caught a big tarpon, and on the same day his son caught one that was even larger. So the story, you can read a little bit more about it underneath there. But here is the guest sitting room. And then over here is the dining room. So it's pretty amazing to think not only Edison and his family would have had meals here, but also people like Herbert Hoover and Henry Ford and other very famous people of the day. And then as you go around the other side, you can see the guest quarters up top here. And then on the ground floor is where the kitchen was. Most of the time back in those days, kitchens were not located in the main house because it would get the main house too warm. And so this is where all the meals were prepared. And then back looking out front here, the beautiful grounds of the Edison estate. So just a great piece of history here in South Florida. Behind me is the Henry Ford winter estate. He purchased this home, which is right next to Edison's house, in 1916, and this became his winter home as well. So the home itself is very nice. I think it's kind of modest for someone as wealthy as Henry Ford, but I think that was also typical of that time period. To the left here is the kitchen, the butler's pantry, also the secretary and maid's quarters, their bedrooms. And then the main area right up here, the living room. I think one of the unique features is right here, a bathroom. That would have been pretty unusual to have in 1916. But the inside, very well decorated, looks very homey. Looks like a great place to spend the winter. And then over here to the right is one of the guest rooms. And of course the porch here, nice wide porch overlooking the Caloosahatchee River. In 1928, Thomas Edison built this study. It's about 100 yards from the main house. And it was actually Henry Ford that funded the project. The reason Henry Ford did that was that at this location, Edison had a laboratory. And Ford wanted to take the laboratory back to his museum in Michigan. So in exchange, he funded the building of Edison's study, as well as some improvements on the pool and the moonlight garden that sits behind the study. So as you can see, it's a pretty small room, but very functional. And Thomas Edison himself would spend most afternoons and also Saturdays here working on various projects. Behind the study is the moonlight garden. This was one of the Edison's favorite spots. Just a nice small garden that they could enjoy at night. Has a little reflecting pond here, lights above. Simply a pleasant place to get some peaceful relaxation. Also a very short distance from the study and his house was the pool. Right around the corner from the study is the caretaker's house. Of course, an estate this large needed a full-time caretaker, and this is where he lived. And you can see it had a three-car garage there, so it wasn't a small place, pretty large. But of course, the caretaker would stay here all year round, taking care of the various needs of Edison's estate. While you're on the estate, be sure to visit the museum and the laboratory. They're right behind me. The lab was built in 1928, a research lab that Edison would use while down here during the winter time. Now, due to COVID-19 restrictions, I was not able to get into the museum today or the lab, but you can look that up on YouTube, find out what that's all about. One of these days when I come back, I'm going to be certain to visit the museum and laboratory, but be sure to check them out. One of my favorite spots on the entire grounds is this banyan tree behind me. And yes, I said tree. I did not say trees. This is actually one tree. The banyan tree is a pretty incredible tree. It has one main trunk, but then it spreads out and then its limbs go back into the ground. So it looks like sometimes hundreds of trees. This one itself is over 400 feet wide. So you can't miss it. When you come down to the grounds, explore the huge banyan tree. Be sure to take a few minutes to really look closely at this banyan tree. In fact, straight ahead is the main trunk. And then if you follow the limbs out, you can see them extend back into the ground. And like I said, this is one tree. It's not multiple trees. To me, it's just real fascinating to see a tree this size. And it was here when Thomas Edison owned the place. And he too loved to come out and just enjoy this piece of nature. So I am sure that if you get a chance to come down here, you're going to enjoy the banyan tree just as much as I do and as much as Thomas Edison did. So that is the Edison Ford Winter Estates. If you come down here to visit it yourself, I'd say plan on at least 3 hours. The walking tour of the house and grounds, the self-guided tour, probably take about 90 minutes to really enjoy it. The museum and the laboratory, that would take an additional probably 90 minutes as well. Obviously, you could do it a little bit faster if you wanted to, or you could spend all day long here really enjoying the history of the place. So, whenever in South Florida, if you get tired of laying out on the beach, come on down to Fort Myers and enjoy the day and spend some time learning a little bit about Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and their impact on the United States.